and welcome to the first episode of Inside Major League Baseball, Inside the MLB. My name is Connor, and I will be delving into the hottest topics of Major League Baseball. It's been a riveting season thus far, has it not? With a ton of surprises, teams that we saw that we thought would be phenomenal this season, like the Tigers, like the Orioles, like the Blue Jays, just under 500 fluttering right now. And we've got a ton of surprises on the other end of that spectrum as well, in contention when we thought they would be in the cellar, like the Nationals, like the Marlins, like the Pirates, just to name a few. But we will get into all that later on this channel in later videos. But right now in this video, I thought it'd be pretty appropriate to delve into the trade deadline. With it being a little less than a month away, August 3rd is a date. They moved it back a couple days from the prior July 31st. And I thought the first name that I'd get into would be Mike Trout, right? And you know, I think it's a little bit more likely that he's traded this deadline than it was last offseason or last deadline when it was kind of bandied about a little bit, but there was no real tangible evidence that the Angels were looking to move him. But after the firing of their GM Perry Manassi, I think with John Mozeliak coming aboard, I think I think he has a little bit more latitude with the owner. The owner, Artie Moreno, kind of was pushing back against the Perry, the prior GM, into making deals. Like he made it known that he did not want to trade Shohei Ohtani, even though it was obviously the prudent move to trade him when he knew that he was going to leave in free agency. But he didn't want to be known to be the guy that traded Shohei Ohtani, which I understand slightly, but nonetheless, as I digress, I think with how putrid the Angels are right now, obviously 35 and 55, one of the worst records in the game if it wasn't for the Rockies, if it wasn't for teams like that. But they're bereft of talent. Just at the major league level, they have the 27th ranked farm system. Guys that they thought would pan out at the major league level, like their first baseman, Schwanuel Nolan. Never pronounced the name right, but you guys got it. You guys can pronounce it phenomenally, way better than I can. So you guys are saying it right now, mumbling and under your breath. That's him. That's the guy I'm alluding to. They rushed him to the big leagues after a year after drafting him in the first round. He has not panned out. He is currently injured. Zach Neto is really only guy. They don't have one guy. Let me just take this out. They don't have one guy with an OPS above 800 other than obviously Trout. Zach Neto is the closest at 791. The shortstop obviously already has 19 home runs. He's the only somewhat moderately productive hitter right now for the Angels, other than Trout. Adele had a flash in the pan at the beginning of the year. We thought, all right, maybe he's the production Trout finally gets. No, he has since fluttered with an OPS sub 700. Farm system, as I mentioned, breadth of talent 27th, 28th in these rankings. They're about pitching obviously has been a tremendous issue for them. Perry tried drafting every single player that was a pitcher a couple drafts ago in 2024. That has not panned out. None of those guys that he drafted are in the big leagues right now. Jose Soriano is another one they could trade, but like I said, they have no pitching. Why not just hold on to him? I think I would if I were them. He's still somewhat young, sub 30. He's hasn't pitched that well as of late. He got off to a rousing start with an ERA under 1, but guys like that, I think you want to try and build around. Hopefully, he can continue it for the years to come. But getting back to Trout, he has a contract that is through 2030 at $37 million per year up until then. He's getting up there in age, obviously, right? He's not running as much. He's not as fleet of foot. He's not as good of a defender as he once was. They moved him back to center because that's what he wanted. He didn't like playing right anymore. And he's still adequate out there, but he's not a gold glover anymore. He's not making these Spider-Man catches as he once did in center, leaping over the fence, robbing home runs. But his offensive production is still there, right? He has an 880 OPS right now. He's leading the team in every pertinent offensive category. Obviously, that's more demeaning to the Angels' offense itself than uplifting Trout. But he's still a starter for the All-Star game. He's still a pretty good. He's not peak Mike Trout, obviously, but he's still a very good player and someone on his own merit of production would portend a phenomenal haul if you were to move him. But you wonder, at his age, will his production start to peter out? So if you're not going to trade him now, I, I quibble with it because I respect his desire to stay with one organization. I respect his decision to want to just play this out, hopefully be on a contending team with the Angels and not be an NBA player that just as soon as they start losing want to be traded, want to jump ship to go to another contender. I respect his dedication to the Angels, but um, even if they don't even have his blessing, I still think it's the prudent decision to trade him. They're just they might they're with the Rockies. They have a somewhat productive offense, right? They never have any pitching, but and even they have a better farm system than the Angels. The Angels are 20 games under 500 in last place and are 27th, 28th ranked in farm system. The only way you can get out of that is trade your best asset and try to recoup some assets. And the guys that you get back for him start producing at the major league level. Because they had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani and still didn't even make the playoffs. So if they don't trade him now, I think you're not going to get adequate value as you would trade him this deadline next year, even if he's as productive, because you have one less year left on his contract. He's obviously 1 year older. That's how it works. Next year, we're all going to be 1 year older. And additionally, the trade market right now of hitters is bereft of them, right? With the implementation of the third wild card, everybody thinks they're in it. Even teams like the Tigers, who are quibbling on whether to trade Tarek Skubal. Obviously, we'll get to Skubal in another video. Teams that are games under 500, 5, 6, 7 games under 500, still think they're in the race because of the depleted league in totality. Guys, teams that are just middling around 500 clearly have their eyes set on a playoff berth. So teams like that aren't going to shop their players they want to buy. So there aren't, other than the Rockies, as I keep mentioning, the Angels, obviously. There's not a lot of just clear-cut sellers right now, and obviously that depletes the market specifically for bats. Mike Trout would be the belle of the ball. Everybody wouldn't want him because they wouldn't have the ability to take on that contract, but and they wouldn't. His injury history is obviously noteworthy. Team that's going to scare away teams, no doubt. But there's a couple teams that unequivocally would need him and want him and be willing to give up assets for him as they are in win now. With that said, here are a couple teams. Number one, the Phillies, right? He's made it known. He's from Philly. He's always repping Eagles gear. He goes to every Eagle game. He's a Philly guy, Philly native, from Philly. Would love to play with Bryce Harper. That's out there. That's known. But it makes sense on the field as well. They need another bat. Brandon Marsh, God bless him, came out of nowhere, but he's hitting cleanup for now. His OPS is just above 800, but it's been dwindling down last few weeks. Obviously, Alec Boehm, Bryson Scott, they have not produced to what their back of the baseball card says it should. They should be producing too. JT Muramuto is getting up there in age. He's not the same catcher, obviously. Trey Turner is having a dismal season. Other than Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper, their offense is not very good. So Mike Trout would be a breath of fresh air in that lineup. Obviously, they're contending. They have a phenomenal rotation, and their window is short with Bryce Harper's window being short, with Kyle Schwarber's window being short, and if Trey Turner, if you still want to throw him in as part of the core, they're finite amount of years to contend. So a deal that I have in the works that I think would fit both teams. Aaron Nola, I think, would have to be in the deal. And you might say, Connor, why would the Angels want Aaron Nola? Well, as I mentioned, they're bereft of arms. They are desperate for arms. And Aaron Nola obviously is having a terrible season and was bad last year. But he's a former All-Star. He's only 31, 32. He's not that old. He can still recoup that production possibly, and I think he'd be a guy that someone like the Angels that are starving for arms specifically, they'd be willing to take a chance on him. Um, Obviously, I believe the Angels or the Phillies would have to eat a huge chunk of that, as they would eat a huge chunk of the Mike Trout deal as well. I'm not going to get in the minutia of the financials. It's boring. I'm not that knowledgeable on it enough to speak knowledgeably on it. But obviously, the team trading for Mike Trout, they would want the Angels to pay for a huge chunk of that, or the team trading for him is going to ask for a monumental haul prospect wise if they're going to eat the entire contract. So, and the Angels, Artie Moreno spends money. I surmise he'd be willing to eat a good chunk of that money through 2030. Nonetheless, I'm not going to get in the minutia with that. Justin Crawford, the top prospect, outfielder, lefty, obviously son of Carl Crawford. He would have to be in the deal. He's not having a great start to his career, but he's only 22, right? I mean, let's not judge him just yet. He has potential. He's blazing fast. And he's made some phenomenal catches there and center. He'd have to be in the deal. Gage Wood, blue chip right hand prospect. He'd have to be in the deal as well. We're snatching the top prospects from each farm system. Obviously, that's what the Angels are going to want, and that's what they should get, given Trout's talent right now, and what I just mentioned earlier, the breadth nature of hitters right now in the trade market. Francisco Renteria would also be in it, in my opinion, an outfielder. He's only 17. You might say, why would the Angels want a 17-year-old? Well, they're not close to contending, so by the time he's ready in 3 to 4 years, maybe they've replenished the farm system enough to begin to start contending somewhat. So he would fit that time limit. I think the Angels would want. They're not gonna. You might think, all right, they want ready now guys. I don't think that they're not even close enough to contend with a couple ready-made guys right now. So I think they would eye, and I think smartly, they're eyeing their contention window 4 to 5 years from now, not next year or the year after that. I think that's fair. They get a reclamation, and from the Phillies' perspective, they probably don't. They want to offload Nola, so I think that's a win-win there. Change of scenery for him, and obviously they don't need him. They have Luzardo, they have Zach Wheeler, they have Christopher Sanchez, they have Luzardo. Their rotation is set. Nola wouldn't even make the playoff roster most likely if the season ended today. So, and I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think the Angels would be willing to take a chance on him. I think that's fair. Yet, 2 blue chip prospects, 1 ready-made right now, young outfielder, and an arm. All right. White Sox are the next team, in my opinion. Kyle Teal would have to be in it, and the White Sox wouldn't mind him being in it. They have Drew Romo, another top catching prospect, ready to supplant Kyle's shoes at the catcher position. Brandon Montgomery, another guy they got. Both of those guys they got from the Red Sox and the Garrett Crochet deal a couple years ago. I believe he would have to be in it as well. Another blue chip outfielder. He just came up this season, his first game as a major leaguer, hit a walk-off home run. Obviously, he's got tremendous promise. He's one of the top prospects in all of baseball. So those are 2 legit guys. And another same premise off the Nola premise, I believe they would want Andrew Benintendi as well. And I believe the White Sox wouldn't mind offloading him. Obviously, he's not so much of an onerous contract this year because he is hitting relatively decent with a 744 OPS. But his contract runs through next year, $15 million remaining on it. Angels get a bat. There you go. I think, in hindsight, I think the Angels would want a little bit more than that. Although Kyle Teal and Brandon Montgomery have such high upside that I think that might be sufficient. I really do. But we can workshop that. White Sox can call me for a more thought out offer. Next team would be the Padres. The Padres are an interesting team for me, right? They're 44 and 45 right now as of recording this on July 7th. They are obviously in the mix, having a hellaciously disappointing season. They started off the year in first place over the Dodgers, and since then they have been one of the worst teams in baseball. They have Manny Machado, who's not hitting, Fernando Tatis, who's finally starting to hit, but is still not hitting for power, doesn't even have an OPS of 800. Xander Bogaerts has been abysmal for a couple years now. Jackson Merrill is nobody's hitting. They can't hit. Their bullpen is the only shining a light, but when you're losing, the bullpen, you're only just holding deficits, right? So you're not losing by 5 runs, you're only losing by 2. So on the starting pitching, other than Michael King, who's been on and off the IL, has not been very good. Randy Vasquez has been disappointing. So they're a mess right now, but they're still in it. And with Manny Machado's win, they still have, and as long as they have Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, that you have to be in it, right? You have to be trying to contend. You want to throw Mason Miller in there as well, even though he's a reliever, but he's just so fucking phenomenal. Might as well just throw him in as part of that group. You got to try and go for it. You know AJ Preller's mantra, motto is to go for it at all costs. So unless they just continue to fall, unless they're 8 games under 500 by the deadline, that we can revisit this. But right now, even though they are not playing well and outside of the playoff picture, I do think the Padres are still in win now mode. They have to capitalize on Manny and Fernando's prime, which they're somewhat different timelines. Obviously, Fernando's much younger, but with Manny, you got to try and capitalize. He's having a down year now. If that portends bad things for the future, I mean, it's going to be one of the worst contracts ever. But I think they go for it. I think they see the scope. The NL is obviously better than the American League, but you see the scope of the league in totality. Other than the Dodgers, even the Yankees obviously have not played well. It's there. I mean, same as the Dodgers, it is there to be had for a World Series champion. So I think the Padres would go for it. I think alluded to Xander, I think would be in it. The Padres would just want to get rid of him for the life. He's $25 million per year through 2033. My Lord, would the Padres want to offload that? I think so. In this proposed deal, obviously, if the Angels are willing to take this, they'd want another additional top prospect. And in this case scenario, I don't think the Padres would be reticent to do it because of what I just outlined, the finite window that they have with Manny Machado's prime. I think they would throw Jackson Merrill in there as well, and then Trout would be their replacement, ostensibly. Ethan Salas, their number one prospect. They're one of the top prospects in the game, catcher. Cruz, Schoolcraft, left-handed pitcher, their number 2 prospect, and then Miguel Mendez, number 3 prospect. I think they just go for it. They've done it before. They did it with the Mason Miller trade. AJ Preller is not hesitant at all to trade top prospects if he thinks that their window is there to compete. Did it with Juan Soto, obviously. I think that's an interesting trade, and I don't think that's. I mean, we can quibble over these deals. Obviously, it's not likely any of these deals actually get done, but I think these teams are extremely realistic to be in the mix for it. Specifically, the Phillies and the Padres, the White Sox, maybe not. Maybe they think their timeline is a little bit in the future. They're not looking to trade some of those guys this season in particular. But the premise of this video is there's definitely deals out there to be made, and if Trout finally relinquishes and says, "All right, let's split Angels," there's teams out there that Angels would be more than satisfied in the return they can get from some of these teams. Last but not least, Tampa Rays. In this proposed deal, they would not take on any money. So with that said, obviously the return would be much lighter. So the names I'm about to spew, you might say, wow, that is not adequate value for Mike Trout. But again, keep in mind the seller. The MO for the Rays obviously is not to take on any money. So if they were actually to trade for Mike Trout, I don't think realistically they would take on any money, let alone a large percentage of it. And I think they're in first place right now. They've always been in the mix, whether it's true or not, for high-profile names. When Juan Soto was traded to the Padres, when Shohei Ohtani was fluttered around to be traded, they were connected to Shohei. They've always been connected to some of these high-profile names. They've never pulled the trigger, so it may not be true, but take that for what you will. That the rate that you may say, oh, this is not realistic, let me shut it off now. But they have been connected. Take that for what you will. And obviously they're in first place right now. As I said, I've mentioned for all these teams, the league is open. And the Rays, say what you want about the Rays, little scrappy Rays, they're first place right now. One of the best records in all of ball. So return would be Chandler Simpson, OPS sub 700, speedy guy though, that would replace Trout in center for the Angels. Still pretty highly regarded, highly touted, still has promise, obviously. Rylan Velati is kind of blocked right now by Aranda and in the outfield. So I think the Rays would be willing to part with him, but the Angels would gladly take him on as another bat. And last, kind of middling arm in Trevor Harrison, the Rays' 17th overall prospect. So again, the reason why their return is so light is because the Rays are not going to take on any money in this proposed fake deal. So as we wrap this video up, want to welcome all of you guys in. If you did watch this to the end, God bless. I appreciate you.